The conference room on the 38th floor had a wall of glass that looked straight down into the atrium, and for 11 years, I'd never once stopped to notice it. I noticed it that night. Cassian sat across from me with a single sheet of paper between us, his pen already uncapped, his watch catching the light every time he moved his wrist. "Sign it, Zora," he said, "or your career ends tonight. Your choice." I looked at the document. I looked at him. Then I picked up the pen and signed my name slowly, the way you sign something you've already decided not to fight. He exhaled. His shoulders dropped an inch. He thought he'd won. He didn't know I'd written that document myself. He didn't know what signing it would prove, and he had no idea the recorder in my bag had been running since the moment he closed the door. My office at Aldridge and Vance had a brass nameplate that took the firm 4 months to order and 3 weeks to misspell the first time. Zora Halloran, head of litigation. I kept the corrected one in a drawer for 2 years before I let facilities mount it, because I'd learned early that at this firm, the things they gave you were always provisional. The title, the corner office on 38, the parking spot with your initials, all of it could be quietly reassigned the moment you became inconvenient. I'd watched it happen to better lawyers than me. I made a habit of never getting comfortable. 11 years I'd been at the firm. I came in as a 6th-year associate with a chip on my shoulder and a conviction rate that made the senior partners nervous, and I clawed my way up through every committee, every brutal late-night document review, every client who treated me like the help until I won them a verdict and suddenly remembered my name. By the time they made me head of litigation, I'd tried more cases than anyone on the floor, and I'd learned the one thing nobody teaches you in law school. The most dangerous person in any room is the one everybody has stopped watching. That was me. I'd built my whole career on being underestimated, and I'd stopped resenting it. It was useful. Aldridge and Vance was a mid-sized litigation firm with national reach. 200 attorneys, 4 offices, the kind of place that handled bet-the-company disputes for clients who could afford to lose a war of attrition. We were profitable in the way that old firms are profitable. A few rainmaker partners at the top, a vast machine of billable hours underneath, and a culture that treated the words client trust as something you said in pitch meetings and forgot by lunch. I loved the work. I'd stopped loving the people who ran it somewhere around year 7. The man who ran it was Cassian Beaumont. Cassian was managing partner, and he looked the part the way certain men train themselves to. Silver at the temples, suits that cost more than my first car, a voice he could lower to make you lean in or raise to fill a room of 300. He'd built his reputation on the firm's largest client relationships, the ones that generated 8 figures a year, and for a long time I'd assumed his confidence came from competence. It took me years to understand that it came from the certainty that no one would ever check his math. The first time I felt the floor shift was on a Tuesday in February. In a partners meeting, I almost skipped. We were reviewing the prior quarter's realization numbers, the gap between what we billed and what we actually collected, and one of the junior partners, a quiet tax specialist named Devika Soares, raised a question about a client matter I didn't recognize. A litigation matter. Mine, supposedly. $41,000 billed in a single month against a client I'd never opened a file for. "That's not one of mine," I said. Cassian didn't even look up from his folder. "It's a sub-matter, pre-litigation strategy. You wouldn't have a separate file. I'd have a calendar entry, I'd have an email. I bill my own time, Cassian." He smiled the way he smiled at opposing counsel right before he buried them. "Zora, the firm is a machine with 1,000 moving parts. Not every part runs through your office. That's why we have a billing committee." A small laugh from the far end of the table. Royce Aldridge's nephew, a 4th year who'd never won a motion in his life. "Let's move on." We moved on. But I wrote the number down. 41,000. A client matter with my name on the originating attorney line, billed at my rate, for work I had never done. That night I stayed late. The 38th floor empties out by 7, and by 9 it's just the cleaning crew and the partners who have nowhere better to be. I pulled my own billing records for the prior 18 months and went through them line by line, the way I'd go through an opposing party's document production looking for the one page they didn't mean to give me. I found 4 more, 5 matters total, all under my originating attorney code, all for clients whose names I half recognized from the firm directory but had never personally represented. $230,000 attributed to me for work that, if it existed at all, I had not performed. Someone was running phantom billings through my account, and whoever it was had access to the originating attorney field, which meant they were senior. Very senior. I sat in my dark office with the atrium glowing below me and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, clarity. The cold, specific clarity of a litigator who has just realized that the case isn't the one she thought she was trying. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send an email. I'd spent 11 years learning that the moment you reveal you're looking, the evidence disappears. Instead, I did what I do best. I started building a file. The next morning, I walked past Cassian in the elevator lobby. He was holding court with 2 senior associates, telling some story about a deposition in the 90s, and he broke off just long enough to give me the warm, hollow smile he gave everyone. "Zora, you look tired. Don't let the work eat you alive." A pat on the shoulder, the kind that's meant to be felt by everyone watching. "We need you sharp." "I'm always sharp, Cassian," I said. He laughed and turned back to his audience. I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close on his face, and I thought, you have no idea how sharp. The demotion came dressed as a promotion, which is how the smart ones always do it. 3 weeks after I'd found the phantom billings, Cassian called me into his office, the one on the corner of 39, a full floor above the rest of us, with its own coffee station and a view that made clients forget what they were paying for. He had a younger partner with him, a man named Garrick Pell, who joined the firm 18 months earlier from a competitor and had spent every day since attaching himself to Cassian like a remora. "Zora, sit," Cassian said. "We've been talking about the litigation group, about growth." I sat. Garrick stayed standing by the window, which told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation was going to go. "The group's gotten too big for one person to run and still try cases," Cassian said. "You're our best trial lawyer. That's the problem. Every hour you spend on administration is an hour you're not in front of a jury. So we're creating a new role. Garrick will take over operational leadership of the group, billing oversight, staffing, client intake. You'll focus on what you do best." I understood it instantly. Billing oversight, client intake. The 2 functions that controlled the originating attorney field. They were taking the keys to the exact machine I'd caught someone abusing, and they were handing them to the man Cassian trusted to keep it quiet. "That's a significant change," I said carefully. "I'd want to understand the reporting structure. Who does Garrick report to on the group's financials?" "Me," Cassian said. "Directly. Cleaner that way." Of course it was. And my client relationships? Garrick spoke for the first time. He had a voice like a man reading aloud from a brochure. "We'll be transitioning intake to a centralized model. Keeps everything consistent. You'll still try the cases, you just won't have to worry about the paperwork." I'd spent 11 years worrying about the paperwork. I knew exactly what it was worth. "It sounds like I'm being removed from the management of my own group," I said. Cassian's face did something subtle and practiced. A flicker of warmth that was meant to look like patience and was actually a warning. "Zora, don't make this adversarial. You're not being removed from anything. You're being freed. There are people in this firm who'd kill for the chance to just try cases and let someone else handle the machine." He leaned back. "You've always been a workhorse. I mean that as a compliment. But workhorses don't run the stable." There it was. 11 years compressed into a single sentence, and he didn't even notice he'd said it. Garrick smiled at the window. I let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds, long enough that both of them began to wonder if I'd heard him. Then I nodded. "You're right," I said. "I do my best work in the courtroom. I'll be glad to let go of the administration." Cassian relaxed visibly. Garrick relaxed too, which was his first mistake. He'd been bracing for a fight, and when it didn't come, he assumed he'd won instead of asking why I'd folded so fast. "Good," Cassian said, standing to signal the meeting was over. "I knew you'd see it." "We'll send around the announcement Friday." I stood. I shook Garrick's hand. It was damp. "Congratulations," I told him, and I meant it the way I mean things to opposing counsel. The announcement went out Friday at 4:58 p.m., timed for maximum visibility and minimum questions, the way bad news always is. Restructuring of the litigation group to drive operational excellence. My name appeared in the 3rd paragraph, after Garrick's, framed as a renewed focus on trial advocacy. By Monday, 3 associates who used to bring me their hardest motions were routing them through Garrick. By the following week, my calendar started thinning. Intake meetings I'd run for years happened without me. I'd walk past a conference room and see Cassian, Garrick, and a client I'd brought into the firm, laughing over coffee I hadn't been offered. I attended every meeting I was still invited to. I tried my cases. I won 2 motions and settled a 3rd on terms that saved a client $4 million, and not one person on the management floor said a word about it. The work I did had stopped translating into the only currency that mattered at Aldridge and Vance, which was visibility on Cassian's radar. I had become, by design, invisible, which was exactly where I needed to be. Because while Garrick was busy centralizing intake, I was watching the billing system from the one vantage point nobody thought to revoke: my own historical access logs and the trial support database that fed them. They'd taken my authority. They'd forgotten my fingerprints were still on the architecture. I'd helped design the firm's matter numbering protocol 6 years earlier, back when I was still useful enough to be asked. I knew where the seams were. I knew which fields were audited and which were not. The phantom billings didn't stop after my demotion. They accelerated. With Garrick controlling intake, the matters multiplied, small enough individually to escape notice, structured to flow through originating codes belonging to lawyers who'd left the firm, retired, or, in my case, been quietly pushed aside and told to be grateful. Whoever was running this had just been handed a faster machine, and a man too eager to please to ask what he was actually signing. One evening in late spring, I stayed past 10, sitting in a darkened conference room with my laptop, mapping the matters into a spreadsheet that was beginning to look less like a billing record and more like a confession waiting for a signature. $52 million. That was the running total of billings I could trace to clients who, when I quietly checked, had no idea they'd been charged for the work. Some of them had been billed for litigation that never went to court. Some for experts who were never retained. One client had paid for 300 hours of a senior associate's time in a single quarter, an associate who'd been on parental leave the entire period. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long moment. I could go to the Bar Association. I could go to the clients. But I'd tried enough cases to know that a pile of documents is not the same thing as proof, and that men like Cassian don't get caught by spreadsheets. They get caught when they put their own name to the lie, in their own hand, believing they're safe. So I wasn't going to expose him. I was going to let him do it to himself. Let me stop here for a second, because what I did next was the part I've never told anyone. And I need you to understand the position I was in before I tell you. I had no authority left, no title that meant anything. Just a spreadsheet and a hunch, and 11 years of watching how men like Cassian think. So tell me, honestly, in the comments, if you were holding $52 million of someone else's lie, would you have taken it to the authorities? Or would you have made him sign it himself? I read every reply. And if you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, stay with me and subscribe. Because what happened in that office, with the recorder running, is the moment the whole thing turned. I never thought I'd be the kind of lawyer who builds a trap out of paper, but that's what the spring became. A slow, patient assembly of the one document Cassian would not be able to walk back. The problem with the phantom billings was that they pointed everywhere and nowhere. Garrick's fingerprints were on the intake. Departed lawyers' codes carried the charges. Cassian sat above all of it, untouched, insulated by exactly the structure he'd built. A regulator could spend 2 years untangling it and still land on Garrick as the fall guy, a mid-level partner who exceeded his authority, quietly severed, while the man who designed the scheme kept his corner office and his clients and his reputation as the firm's elder statesman. I'd seen that movie. I'd watched the firm produce it twice before, with other people in the starring role. I didn't want Garrick. Garrick was a remora. I wanted the shark. So I built him a reason to come to me. It started with a single client matter, the one billed against an associate on parental leave, 300 hours that never happened. I knew the client personally. I'd brought them in years earlier, a regional logistics company run by a careful woman named Petra Lindgren who read every invoice line by line, which was precisely why Cassian's people had been careful to route the worst of it elsewhere. But the leave period billing had slipped through. It was a mistake. And mistakes are doors. I went to Petra directly, not as head of litigation, a title I no longer functionally held, but as the lawyer who'd won her a 7-figure judgment 6 years before and earned the right to a private conversation. I told her, carefully and truthfully, that I had concerns about a billing discrepancy on her account and that I wanted to review the underlying records before raising it through firm channels. She gave me written authorization to audit her own file. That authorization was the first brick. It made everything I did afterward not snooping, but a client-requested review, protected, documented, legitimate. Then I wrote the bait. I drafted a memorandum. On its face, it was an internal billing reconciliation summary for the Lindgren matter, the kind of dry document that crosses a managing partner's desk a dozen times a week. But I built it wrong on purpose. I structured it so that the only way to resolve the discrepancy, the only way to make Petra's account balance and avoid a client inquiry that would trigger a formal review, was for a senior partner to authorize a reclassification of the disputed hours, to sign off that the work had, in fact, been performed under his supervision. A real reconciliation would have flagged the phantom hours and refunded them. My memo offered Cassian the other path. Certify the lie in writing and make the problem disappear. I knew which one he'd choose, because men who've never been checked always reach for the cover-up. It's reflexive. It's the tell. I left a copy where Garrick would find it, with a note that the Lindgren client was asking questions and that it needed managing partner sign-off before quarter end. Then I waited. It took 9 days. Cassian's assistant called me on a Wednesday afternoon. He'd like to see you. Tonight, if you're free. After 6. After 6, when the floor empties, when there are no witnesses. I was free. I spent the afternoon doing 2 things. First, I confirmed the spreadsheet, The full 52 million, every traced matter, cross-referenced now against client authorizations I'd quietly gathered from 3 other clients who, like Petra, had given me permission to review their files. It was no longer a hunch. It was a case. Second, I checked the recorder. In my state, single-party consent governs a private conversation. If I'm a party to it, I can record it. I'd confirmed this with outside ethics counsel weeks earlier in writing on a hypothetical I'd framed carefully enough that it couldn't be traced to a live matter. The little device sat at the bottom of my bag beneath a legal pad and a phone charger, and I tested it twice before I went up. At 6:40, I took the internal stair to 39. The corner office glowed at the end of a dark hallway, the only light on the floor. Cassian was behind his desk with the Lindgren memo in front of him and a glass of something amber at his elbow. Garrick was not there. That was the second tell. He'd sent Garrick home. Whatever he was about to do, he wanted no partner-level witness. "Zora, sit." He didn't smile this time. "We have a problem with the Lindgren account, and I'm told you've been talking to the client." "She had questions about an invoice," I said. "I have a relationship with her. I didn't want it to become a thing." "It's already a thing." He tapped the memo. 300 hours billed during a leave period. That's the kind of error that ends up in front of the bar if it's handled wrong. He looked at me, and for the first time in 11 years, I watched Cassian Beaumont decide whether I was a problem or a tool. "I need this reconciled and signed off tonight. By you, as the originating attorney of record. You certify the hours were performed under proper supervision. I countersign as managing partner, and it goes away. Clean." There it was. He was asking me to put my name to it first, to make myself the firewall, so that if it ever surfaced, the lie ran through my account and not his. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. He leaned back, and the warmth came off him like a coat dropped on the floor. "Then you're a partner-track attorney who's been demoted, who's been talking to a client behind firm leadership's back, and who's about to be the named originating attorney on a billing irregularity she failed to catch for a year. Sign it, Zora, or your career ends tonight. Your choice." I let him sit in his certainty for a moment. Down in the atrium, 38 floors of glass held the city's lights perfectly still. Then I reached for the pen, and I signed. His shoulders dropped. He thought he'd just made me the firewall. He had no idea I'd written the memo so that his counter's signature wouldn't seal a reconciliation. It would certify in his own hand that he had personally supervised work that, as 4 clients' authorizations and his own firm's leave records would prove, had never occurred at all. He picked up his pen. "Good girl," he said, and signed his name beneath mine. The recorder, at the bottom of my bag, had heard every word. I didn't move when he capped his pen. I sat there and let him have his moment, because I'd learned that the most useful thing you can do at the instant a powerful man relaxes is nothing at all. "That wasn't so hard," Cassian said. He slid the memo into a folder, satisfied, already mentally on to the next thing. "You'll find this is how it works at the top, Zora. Problems don't get solved. They get managed. You should have learned that years ago instead of fighting everything." "You're probably right," I said. "Can I ask you one thing before I go?" "Of course." "The Lindgren hours. The 300 you just certified you supervised. Where were they performed?" I ask, because the associate who billed them, Naomi Castellani, was on parental leave the entire quarter. "I have the firm's own leave records, so I'm trying to understand what exactly you just put your name to." The room changed temperature. I watched it happen across his face, the slow arrival of a man realizing that the floor he's standing on was built by someone else. "What is this?" he said. It wasn't a question. "It's a reconciliation memo," I said. "You asked me to certify the hours. I declined to certify a lie, which is why my signature is on the cover sheet and not the certification line. You might want to look again. You signed the certification, you alone, stating that you personally supervised 300 hours of work that the firm's records show could not have happened. I let that land. And that's just one matter, Cassian. I've traced $52 million in billings across 19 clients to work that was never performed. Phantom hours run through originating codes belonging to lawyers who'd left, retired, or, in my case, been demoted and told to be grateful. I have written authorization from 4 of those clients to audit their files. I have the full reconstruction. And as of about 4 minutes ago, I have you, in your own voice, threatening to end my career unless I helped you bury one of them. His eyes went to my bag, then to the door, then back to me, and I saw him do the math that men like him only ever do too late. You recorded this. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. Single-party consent state. I'm a party. I checked with ethics counsel in writing months ago. I stood and lifted the bag onto my shoulder, unhurried. I checked everything, Cassian. That's the part you never understood about me. You called me a workhorse. You meant it as a ceiling. But the thing about doing all the work is that you learn where every body is buried, because you're the one they hand the shovel to. He stood up fast, the chair rolling back into the credenza. Zora, sit down. Let's talk. Whatever you think you have, there are ways to handle this internally. I can make you partner. Tonight. Equity. Full equity. Your name in the litigation group. I'll push Garrick out by Friday. An hour ago I was a career you could end on a whim. Now I'm a problem you want to make partner. You should hear how fast your own offer moves. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to help yourself, and you're doing it badly, which is new for you. I walked to the door and turned. Here's what happens now. I'm not going to the Bar Association tonight, and I'm not going to the clients tonight, because I want you to have one weekend to understand exactly where you are. On Monday morning, there's a regularly scheduled meeting of the firm's executive committee. Royce Aldridge will be there. So will outside counsel. I've already retained them on behalf of the 4 clients who authorized the audit. You're welcome to attend. You're the only item on the agenda. You can't do this, he said, and his voice cracked on the last word, the first honest sound I'd heard from him in 11 years. I built this firm. Half these clients came in because of me. You take this public and you don't just end me. You take down the whole... No, I said, you did that, in your own hand. I just asked you to sign. I opened the door. The dark hallway stretched out toward the elevators, and behind me I could hear him breathing, fast and shallow, a man standing in the wreckage of his own certainty trying to find a wall that wasn't there. They'll never make you managing partner, he said to my back. A last, small cruelty, because it was all he had left. I stopped. I didn't turn around. I never wanted to be managing partner, Cassian. I wanted to be the person you couldn't afford to underestimate, and you just spent 11 years making sure I'd be very, very good at it. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Down in the atrium, the lights held perfectly still, 38 floors of glass and quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I noticed how beautiful it was. The doors opened. I stepped in. And as they closed on the empty hallway and the glowing corner office at the end of it, I took the recorder out of my bag, checked the file one last time, and saved it under a name I'd chosen weeks before. Exhibit 1. The executive committee met that Monday at 9 in the largest conference room on 39, the one with the long walnut table that Royce Aldridge's grandfather had supposedly bought at auction. I'd never been invited to sit at it. I sat at it that morning with outside counsel on my right and a bound report in front of every seat. $52 million across 19 clients, reconstructed matter by matter, cross-referenced against client authorizations, and the firm's own leave and payroll records. The recording was a single-line item in the appendix, transcribed and notarized. I didn't play it. I didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew how to read a transcript. Cassian came. I'll give him that. He walked in at 9:04, gray under the recessed lights, and took the seat that had been his for 19 years, and for the first 10 minutes he tried the only thing he knew how to do. He performed. He talked about context, about the complexity of a firm with 200 attorneys, about how a managing partner can't personally verify every line of every invoice, about scapegoating and ambition, and the danger of letting a disgruntled senior lawyer rewrite history. He was good. He'd always been good. Then Royce Aldridge slid the transcript across the walnut table and asked him to read paragraph 6 aloud, the part where Cassian explained how problems at the top don't get solved, they get managed. And Cassian stopped performing because there is no closing argument for your own recorded voice. It moved fast after that, the way these things do once the firewall is gone. Outside counsel for the 4 authorizing clients had already filed. By Wednesday, the bar's disciplinary council had opened a formal inquiry. By the following Monday, Cassian Beaumont had resigned to pursue other interests, a phrase the firm's own communications team must have hated writing, and Garrick Pell, who it turned out had signed dozens of intake reclassifications without ever asking what he was reclassifying, was gone the same afternoon, his remora instincts having attached him, finally, to the wrong host. The firm survived, barely, and only because it moved fast and made the clients whole. Restitution went out within 60 days. Every padded hour refunded, every phantom matter reversed, with interest. It cost Aldridge and Vance more than $52 million when the penalties and the lost business were counted, and it cost 2 senior partners their licenses, and it cost Cassian the only thing he'd ever truly valued, which was the certainty that no one would ever check his math. They offered me managing partner. Royce himself in his office, with the door closed and a humility in his voice I'd never heard before. I told him no. I'd meant what I said in that dark hallway. I'd never wanted the title. I took something else instead. I rebuilt the litigation group on my own terms, with a billing structure I designed so that no originating code could ever again carry a charge no human being could account for. Naomi Castellani, the associate whose parental leave had been the door I walked through, came back to a promotion and never knew, for a long time, that her absence had been the thing that unraveled it all. I let her find out eventually. She cried. I didn't. I kept the corrected brass nameplate. I never did get comfortable. Cassian I saw once more, almost a year later, across the lobby of a courthouse downtown. He was carrying his own files now, no associate trailing behind him, working the kind of solo matters that find a disbarred adjacent name when the big firms won't return the call. He saw me. He stopped. For a moment I thought he might say something, and I think he wanted to. Some last small cruelty, some line about how I'd never understand what it took to build something. But he didn't have the standing anymore. That's the thing about leverage. It isn't loud. It doesn't shake hands or fill rooms. It just sits quietly in a folder, in a recording, in a signature you were certain you were safe to give. And it waits for the person everyone stopped watching. He nodded at me. I nodded back. And I walked into my courtroom, where the work was, where it had always been, and let the doors close behind me.